Wherever you go, there you are, the saying goes. But what does the saying mean? Well, a story will help to illustrate the point. A stranger, a newcomer, showed up one day in a small town. He came to the local general store, the type of place where the old farmers go for a moon pie and a Coke and then stay for a morning, swapping wisdom and jokes and lies. The stranger walked up to a group of the old men in their overalls, and he said in a very out-of-towner kind of way, "I've just moved to town. Can you tell me what the people are like around here?" The old men didn't answer right away. First they looked at one another, and then they looked at the floor, and then they looked back at the stranger, until at last one of them, with the wisdom of a Buddhist monk, responded, "Well, I reckon that depends. What were people like where you came from?" And that's a longer way of making the same point as the saying with which I began, wherever you go, there you are. If you encountered the people in the place you were before as mean-spirited and unkind, as suspicious and deceitful, as always being out for a quick buck and trying to get one over on you, that's likely what you'll encounter in this place, because that's what you'll be looking for here. And you tend to find what you look for. There are a lot of bad people hereabouts. If, on the other hand, you encountered the people in the previous place as generous and open-hearted, as generally honest and earnest and neighborly, if you looked at everything that was in that place and you saw mostly kindness, not perfection, but more good than bad, more hope than hurt, well, that's most likely what this place is like too. A lot of good people hereabouts. Because wherever you go, there you are. Your worldview and your temperament, your outlook and your expectations, the lenses through which you see everyone and everything. And if your eye is healthy, you'll see the good, you'll see the life, you'll see the light. And if your eye is toxic, then the place you came from was a dystopia, and the place you are now is a dystopia, and the place you go next will be a dystopia. And this is what Jesus meant in the Sermon on the Mount when he said, "The eye is the lamp of the body." If your eyes are not good, if your eyes are good, your whole body, your whole being will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. How is the world? Well, how do you see the world? That has a lot to do with how the world is. And by the way, this isn't just a power of positive thinking, self-help message. It's a little more life and death than that, as we shall see. Do you look at the world and see the hand of God, the kingdom of God, present and unfolding, infinite in possibility, life-altering in abundance? Or is there a snake in every woodpile and a worm in every apple, and is the world out to get you and to hurt you and to harm you? I'm asking these questions because I'm trying really, really hard to get my head around the particular tragic incident of about 2 weeks ago where Ralph Yarl, a black teenager, knocked on the door of a Kansas City house because he was lost, trying to figure out where to go to pick up his siblings like the dutiful son that he was. But he accidentally went to 1100 Northeast 115th Street instead of 1100 Northeast 115th Terrace. Probably all Ralph did was type 1100 Northeast 115th into his phone and hit accept when the GPS helpfully filled in a suggestion. He was only off by 1 block. I typed it into Google Earth, and one address is literally around the corner from the other. So Ralph innocently ended up at the wrong house at about 9:15 at night, and he knocked, and he waited. And then the unthinkable happened. And here I quote from a CNN article. The homeowner opened fire through a locked glass door without any words exchanged because he thought the teen was trying to break in and he was scared to death due to the boy's size, according to statements in a probable cause document. Ralph Yarl was seen as most likely a menace, probably a threat. Best to shoot first and ask questions later. Now, this could be yet another sermon about guns and gun violence, and to be clear, the situation isn't not about guns. A gun was clearly involved, clearly misused, or at least incautiously used, and a terrible accident, very nearly a tragedy, occurred. But for today, this isn't a sermon about guns and gun violence, per se. And this could be a sermon about our country's ongoing historical problems with race, because the situation isn't not about race. We might ask ourselves, would a young white man have been wordlessly shot? Or did the homeowner leap to a deeply embedded assumption that led him to shoot Ralph Yarl because it was after 9 p.m. and Ralph was black, and the only reason a black teen would be standing on a white man's porch in a quiet, middle-class suburban neighborhood after 9 is to commit a robbery? I mean, I had to know, so I looked it up on Google Earth. The neighborhood looks like Mayberry. Neatly kept lawns, Priuses and SUVs and motorhomes in driveways, hardly a gangland. It wasn't the type of neighborhood where Ralph Yarl was afraid to knock on an unfamiliar door. So no outward reason to assume a violent robbery other than the time of day and Ralph's skin color. And it ought to bother us, or at least cause us to take inventory, but for today, this isn't a sermon about race per se. So if it isn't about guns per se, and if it isn't about race per se, then what is this sermon about? Well, the particular angle that I'm taking for today is to ask some questions about core assumptions and about governing narratives and about worldview. To ask questions about what are people like around here? You see, I read another article about the shooting, and this one was an interview with the grandson of the 84-year-old homeowner. And the young man described his grandfather as being strongly influenced by cable news conspiracy theories and a steady diet of fear-mongering. He described the loud blaring of the television in his grandfather's home all day, every day, and his grandfather's frequently voiced suspicions about vaccine lies and election lies and about politicians' lies and about the threats posed by foreigners and about how we need to be on the lookout because they this and they that. And the world is a scary, scary, awful, evil place. I'll repeat a line from the earlier article. The homeowner opened fire through a locked glass door, because he was scared to death. And this makes what happened in Kansas City a tragedy, because if that's the way the world is, threat, conspiracy, enemy, hoax, danger, other, fear, if that's the soundtrack of your life, threat, conspiracy, enemy, hoax, danger, other, fear, if that's what you marinate in, threat, conspiracy, enemy, hoax, danger, other, fear, well, your intake impacts your outlook. So the best thing you can do in that world is to own a gun to defend yourself, and if anyone shows up unexpectedly on your doorstep at night, it's clearly for nefarious reasons, even if there hasn't been a crime spree in the neighborhood. And in particular, if the person on your doorstep is different from you, then the best, the most logical, the most sensible, the most level-headed thing that you can do is to shoot them. You can't be too careful because there are a lot of bad people around here. Threat, conspiracy, enemy, hoax, danger, other, fear. Can you see the sad, cynical inevitability of what happened? Doesn't make the homeowner a bad, horrible, evil person. He didn't wake up that morning thinking, I believe I'll shoot someone today. But when there was a knock at his door, he first fetched his gun. And when he saw a black teenager standing on his porch, he immediately fired his gun, because the eye is the lamp of the body, or the lens of the heart. And what are you looking for? Perhaps the reason Ralph Yarl was shot is that Andrew Lester was poisoned. Now, I want to contrast that worldview of fear and scarcity and suspicion and cynicism and trust no one, and the world is most likely out to get me, with the 23rd Psalm. I'm going to advance a hypothesis. That the 23rd Psalm is not a mere nicety, not a pretty poem, not a cross-stitch sampler piece to hang upon the wall. I'm going to suggest that this psalm is a set of lenses and a way of seeing the world. And I'm going to suggest that this psalm is one of the most life-affirming things that we can remind ourselves of and that we can teach our children. You've heard the passage, train up children in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. Then teach them this. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not lack. My needs, my basic needs will be provided. I don't doubt that. And he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. And when my soul is feeling worn, torn, forlorn, he restores my soul. The Lord is my shepherd. And that doesn't make the world an always easy place or a perfectly safe place. It doesn't mean that we don't walk through the valley of the shadow, but it does impact how we walk in that valley. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You hear the difference between that core affirmation and the core affirmation of be afraid, be very afraid, the foreigners are coming, the liars are coming, the conspirators are coming, the world is out to get you, trust no one. Threat, conspiracy, enemy, hoax, danger, other, fear. The psalm does not, in fact, deny that we may encounter enemies in this world. People who would wish us harm. But the psalm again asserts a worldview. You, God, prepare a table before me even in the presence of my enemies. You provide, you protect, you sustain, you nurture, you nourish, you give, and my cup overflows, my cup overflows, my cup overflows. And that's a fundamentally different worldview from my enemies are coming for my cup. And this, by the way, is not a Pollyanna worldview, blindly optimistic or childishly naive. It does not deny danger. It does not ignore evil. And it does not absolve us from common sense actions like keeping our eyes open if we're walking through a dark parking lot late at night. But it does cause us to view the world as God-filled rather than godless, as hope-filled rather than hopeless, as ruled by resurrection rather than ruled by crucifixion. Is the cup half empty, or is it half full? It's neither. The cup overflows. So what does this Psalm 23 way of seeing the world enable? Well, the way you see the world is ultimately how you live in the world, right? Your intake affects your outlook. Shepherd, security, care, protection, abundance, gratitude, grace. Shepherd, security, care, protection, abundance, gratitude, grace. Shepherd, security, care, protection, abundance, gratitude, grace. And such a worldview enables precisely the work of the early church described in Acts. The early church, which, by the way, was made up of people who, as Pastor Katie pointed out, often had to hide in caves. But they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, which presumably is Jesus' teaching, and to fellowship, and to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. And everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. And all the believers were together, and they had everything in common. And they sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had a need, to anyone who had a need, to anyone who had a need. And every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts, and they broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Saved from what? Well, maybe saved from their worst selves and their worst impulses. Maybe saved from a toxic worldview. Maybe saved from bad eyesight that would cause you to see in the person you meet not a brother or a mother, but merely an other. Maybe saved from hostility, and maybe saved for hospitality. So our calling, perhaps it's as simple as this: to see the world with a Psalm 23 way of seeing, and to live in the world with an Acts 2 way of being. To see the kingdom and to be the kingdom until the kingdom fully comes. What are the people like hereabouts? Amen.